All right, welcome everybody. We're still several minutes early. I was just small chatting with Dave here over PowerPoints and all that was going on. Feel free to at any time unmute yourself and weigh in or use the chat button. I think for most of your Zooms, you have to actually put your cursor down over the Zoom window, and you might even have the three dots for more, which is how you can find the chat option. It's also Alt-H on your keyboard. There's also a method, hopefully you can see that there, where you can raise your hand for questions, answer questions, ask us to go faster, that kind of thing. So feel free to ask questions now if you want. So while we're doing this, Dave, where are you calling from?
I'm actually in England at the moment, in a hotel, where I'm documenting a mobile phone data center for BT. And this is, we've been doing this about a year and a half, and we've done about 3,500 racks so far. We've got another 3,000 to do.
I have to learn to speak British. 3,000 racks? What does that mean?
Or cabinets.
Cabinets, racks. I get it.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, there's terminology, and you will spot my spelling mistakes as Americans would see it. Although we did it, although we did invent the language, so we have the moral right. But I've tried to use American spellings. So I've been spending in the day with a colleague auditing racks, checking what's in them, and helping engineers find things because they don't know where things are.
Very good. If anybody wants to just weigh into the chat window with where you're calling from, it's always kind of interesting to see how far flung we are. I'm actually sitting in Western Canada right now in BC, a town called Squamish, the outdoor recreation capital of Canada. And I'll be in New York next week. And did I hear you're going to be in Las Vegas next month?
Yeah, I'm presenting at a 3-hour workshop in Vegas at the end of September. And so there's lots of people who come along who are existing Visio users, but actually there's still a lot to learn, especially if it's part of your day job, doing designs and planning of infrastructure.
Yeah.
So I'll be there for 3 or 4 days.
And hello to Gregory from Washington, D.C. area, and to Jerry in Dallas, Texas. I have family in Dallas. Go up there a couple times a year.
Yeah. I was in Dallas a few months ago, actually, doing Visio training for General Motors. So they wanted to try and get some Visio standards to then roll out across the whole of their IT.
I can't wait. I cannot wait to get to your presentation here. I hear all these things you're doing in Visio. It's like, oh, it's just a full-time job with Visio.
Yeah, it's actually not the main job. It's part of the job. But it's just no one else wants to do it. So it's just good business, I suppose.
Yeah. So without further ado, then let me get the preliminaries done and let David take control and show us what's going on in the world of Visio and documentation automation. Welcome to the IT Documentation Users Group webinar. I'm calling it 2019.7 because it's the year and the month. This one's titled Visio Automation Tips and Tricks. You can read the rest or just stay tuned for a couple minutes and you'll get more details. I know not all of you guys came in here directly from ITDUG. We advertise this on IT Business Owners Group as well as EurekaProcess.com. Welcome all. The only true affiliation with ITDUG is that the information here is tuned with that audience in mind. Our members have said we want more content, so here it is. Real quick about ITDUG. It was founded by Tracy Harden, who I do not see in this list for today. She formed it in May of 2018, originally wanting to get some help trying to figure out IT glue. She was getting kind of frustrated managing the group in August of 2018, invited me to come along. And so to help garner more input and more people to share our mind, we opened it up to all types of documentation so we can have presentations like today's. And Tracy is also an MSP business owner and has been since 2001. She owns Next Century Technologies in Kentucky. I've been in IT since '94. I've also been there the MSP route, both in ownership, leadership, and as an employee. I founded my business in 2017 doing process design and EOS facilitation, which is when I found out after talking to Tracy for several months that, you know what, half of what I do is documentation, either documenting stuff that we're deciding or teaching IT firms how to do documentation, which is why Tracy and I felt it was a good fit that I could help out with this group. That was well timed. Membership has been growing great thanks to members like you. Please do keep inviting. The more people we have in the group, the more potential answers we have to the challenges that we're having. I honestly found that before 500 members, Tracy and I were the only ones really posting very often. But now that we've broached that, as you can see, our membership has grown quite well. And I've seen a lot more of you guys asking questions and answering questions, which is super appreciated for our fellow peers. Without further ado, I do want to introduce Dave Cuthbertson. Hopefully I said that right.
Yep.
He's founded two firms recently, AssetGen and SquareMile, which we'll hear a little more about. I wrote dozens. I was going to ask him, is it actually hundreds of large-scale documentation projects like the one you're working on today, Dave?
Yeah, probably. We've been going 15, 16 years, so we've been around a lot of places, including the US over that time. So I suppose, yeah, it's probably hundreds.
Hundreds, all right. I'll get the slide for next time. And welcome Al from Chicago. I'm going to stop my screen share now and let Dave share his PowerPoint. While he's getting that prepared, Dave only has a few slides prepared. He would love to hear interactive questions from you guys. He's also got Visio loaded up to actually do stuff live. If you have questions, want him to repeat something, want to point us in a different direction, please go for it. It'll be totally okay. I'm going to try to watch the members panel. If you have a chat, please do so, or raise your hand, or even unmute your mic and just interrupt. It'll be okay. Welcome Ash from Jacksonville. My kids live in Jacksonville. Tiny, tiny world this is. All right, Dave, have fun.
Okay, good. So the first thing, Alan, is a bit of feedback. Can you see my screen?
I can.
Brilliant, good. Welcome everybody. My name's Dave Cuthbertson, originally Scottish in nature. I'm based in England, although I work all over the world. And as Alan said, I run two companies here in England, AssetGen, which is a software company, and SquareMile Systems, which is our services business. Been doing documentation as a business for many years. And probably the best way to understand is how I got to where I am and what I'm going to be covering and why I built up this expertise. And I'm going to let you ask any questions you like as we go along this. Is originally my first business in about 1990 was network troubleshooting. So who do you call when Cisco and IBM and others don't understand why the network's not working? And so my background is really a network analyst. And as I solved people's problems and charged them a lot of money, they then started asking me to build their networks and put in their Cisco environments. And eventually, after about 12 years, I was running effectively a managed service provider, running the voice and data services for financial services companies. And the one thing that I recognized that was different between us and everybody else was we cared about control and communication. So if there's a problem, I want any member of my team to be able to solve it, not just me or the person that installed things. And so, good history, I sold those businesses back in 2004, and then thought, what do I do for my next businesses where in this ever-changing world of IT, what would keep me in business forever? And where is there opportunity? And that's when I came down looking back saying, actually, the biggest difference and issue is our culture, because we cared about things. And what we did is we actually tried to adopt practices and methods that actually made it simpler for us. You know, what was best practice? And I started to get into this, and I got into the Itil Framework, which came out originally from the UK. It's been adopted on others for service management and service desks. But I also got involved with the British Computer Society and ended up setting the Itil group up as the chairman there. And then I got involved in various other trade bodies as I searched and said, if I really want to supply something that's of value, what's the best you can do? What's the best in the industry? And I come across a lot to the US for a US trade body called BIXI, which is all about building and cabling and data center design and things. And I'm on the committee of the UK BIXI chapter. And that's why I'm coming to Las Vegas in September to actually talk at their conference about Visio automation. If you're designing data centers, what's the best way to document them as part of the design process so you can manage it operationally? It just makes common sense. Just make it simple for everybody. But what it meant was I then investigated and then said, what were the root problems? And there was partly skills and awareness, but also people didn't know what a good way was to name things or to label things or to how to manage change or between teams. How to even just capture the knowledge of an existing infrastructure in an efficient way, because otherwise the worst thing of doing an audit is to have to do another one because it wasn't good enough quality. So what's the best way to do an audit? So a lot of this is all focused around how you do things. And part of this was you can't understand an infrastructure just by having a spreadsheet or a database. You also need schematics to explain things like diagrams. And that's how I got onto the Visio side. And I ended up becoming an expert in applying Visio to IT environments, particularly on a large scale, where we don't have 10 diagrams, we maybe have 1,000 or 10,000. So what's the best method and what's the principle? And more recently, I think I may have mentioned to Alan, we even got asked by Microsoft to train up their data center people around the world, because actually they themselves need to know how to apply a tool, because it also involves conventions and methods. And that's how we ended up with today, my day job. So I run a small team, there's 5 of us. We have various contractors that come and help us out. And our main work is developing a database that basically swallows up all the knowledge that you would have in spreadsheets. And part of it, what it does is it creates Visio diagrams automatically. We give away free Visio utilities, and everybody is welcome to contact us. And we specifically designed them for doing things like networks and data centers, things that just make Visio go faster, where I've got to bash out diagrams or do things faster and quicker. And I'll show a couple of them just to give an example, but they're free. And this is how we go to market. We give away some free stuff, and then people go, I've got 5 data centers to do. I don't have 5 racks, 5 data centers. What else do you do? Because this is useful. And if this is free, what do you do for your day job? And so a lot of our work is all around documentation, working out methods, processes, and capturing knowledge so you can then have centralized planning and design and operations, but you may then offshore the build remotely to different countries. And over the time, the last sort of 14, 15 years we've been going, you can see we've accumulated a number of different customers. We've been to Chicago, I saw somebody came there, spent quite a few days with Blue Cross Blue Shield, but also various other countries. I've been in Romania, the Czech Republic, Saudi Arabia, obviously the States quite a bit. New York City, I've got a couple of our implementations doing both the schools but also the emergency services at the moment. And so it could be military, it could be financial. Everybody's got the same problems. People in IT don't like documenting things, but also they don't know how to. And so it's a good business. I have no competition. People fly me from England to America because nobody in America seems to want to do this. But actually, it's the same in the rest of the world. So hopefully I'll give you a few tips and tricks, and you can use them for both yourself. But if you want to build a service around it, just repeat the same process that I'm doing. It's not difficult, but actually it just requires focus. So to get into things, when I start with customers and they're explaining their problems, we've lost control, we've had a security breach, we don't know how everything works, we don't know where everything is. I said, well, what you try and do is you try and break your complexity down to make it easily understandable. And we'll often break it down into 2 areas. We'll break it down into schematics, things that make it easy to understand. And this is where Visio comes in, but we could use PowerPoint or CAD. And we'll often break it down into a structured form. So we'll create a spreadsheet, but we then start finding we have one spreadsheet for things, an inventory. We may have another spreadsheet for dependencies. This is the software that runs on the servers. This is the cabling between the connections. And effectively, we'll end up starting to create quite a few data sets. And the trouble is starting to coordinate them. And this is really part of what we want to do here, is to think about that. And when you look a little bit further, you then realize that when you create a schematic like Visio, all you're doing is creating a view of data that often has dependencies. I'm doing a floor plan because I want to see where things are. So there's a space dependency, or a rack layout, cabinet layout, or a network diagram. And what I found quite successful and explained to people is that when you start looking at any component, and I've taken a server here as an example, you'll find it spread across all sorts of things for project documents. You'll be in monitoring tools, that'll be in your service desk, it'll be in many different areas, and you'll duplicate the data. And of course you won't maintain or keep it up to date because often those tools are used by different teams. So my view, and what I found quite successful, is explaining that On a commercial side, you probably want to keep data, but it doesn't help you with any planning. But it's very useful when it comes to the finance side and warranties and support calls. From a physical side, you'll probably want to start doing things where you want to show dependencies. This server is in this cabinet, this server is in this room, this server is connected to this cable, to this power. And you start realizing you're starting to document dependencies that are also shared by network devices and load balancers and patch panels. And so really there's no natural owner for that. So you have to set up a centralized team. And when we start getting to the logical view of the server and then what it does, where we don't care about where it is, we just want to care what it does, we start grouping it together in networks and storage networks and which virtual machines and others. And we start creating diagrams and spreadsheets that record all of that. And eventually you start realizing from a risk perspective, you'll start documenting, well, how many of these things are used and by who? And so what's the risk if this system doesn't have a disaster recovery? Or do we have a production environment and a test environment? Where is our user data? And you start realizing actually you don't need a lot of technical detail about the server. You just need to know there is one, but who's the owner of it and what does it really mean? And the easiest way to explain it is with a whiteboard, because you want to simplify it and you maybe get to architecture diagrams. So from a perspective of looking from a high level view, a diagram is just a view of data. You can never have good diagrams if you don't have good data. So as a result of that, some of the features of Visio that most people are not aware of is how you can create diagrams from data. So I can reuse a list of servers and show where they are in a rack or cabinet, but I can also use that same list of servers to also show groupings about which are production and test, or I can use that same list of servers as to what's recoverable in an architecture. How do we fail over from one system to another? So good data equals good diagrams. And that's a lot of what my day job is, helping people get good data, because then diagrams are easy. And there's many different types of diagrams. I tried writing a list for somebody, how many different types of diagrams do we use in IT? And I gave up at 600 after one day, 600 different types of diagrams.
Holy.
Yep. All for different reasons. But actually, when you start looking at it, you then start realizing, how will you ever keep this up to date? And of course, that's the problem with IT. People don't like documenting things, particularly if nobody's ever going to use it or it's not reusable. So simple thing is less data, more diagrams. And I'll show you those different techniques, but it could be any one of those. I want to see how something is built, which cards are in which slots, or I want to see how it links into the network, or just maybe high level views. But you'll end up with lots. And the answer is you'll never produce what everybody needs, but you'll have the data that probably will help them get there quicker. So the project for New York City, they've got 2,000 campus locations because there's 2,000 schools. So why not have a network diagram for every school updated every night? So I've got 2,000 network diagrams to update, but I've also got 2,000 wireless access diagrams to update where all the access points are. And probably there may be the security systems. So now, rather than just 2,000 diagrams, I've got 6,000 to maintain every night. So I don't want to draw them if I can automate it, but what I do need is I need one item of data about one device, and that can be used as the basis. And this is where Visio really comes in. And a lot of people aren't aware of these features, which have been around for many years.
And so, Dave, as you pop in, I just wanted to share a comment from the forum from Alan Miller. He is curious, or maybe put this into your stack somewhere if you're familiar with building information modeling and how that might integrate at the rack level.
And the answer is it doesn't work really very well, unfortunately, because I've researched and talked with people in the BIM world, and often BIM is used as a tool to help with the design and build of systems, but it's often far too complex for people to maintain and update as part of their daily job. So it's difficult enough for facilities managers to maintain BIM systems, but never mind the IT people who are saying it only does the physical side but doesn't do the logical for us, and we don't have the symbols and shapes. And if you make it difficult, they'll just do it on the back of an envelope, or they'll do it in PowerPoint or Visio because they need to get something done quickly. And so BIM is a great idea for building management, but it doesn't support the flexibility and perspectives that you need from an IT perspective. Because BIM is more around the space side, where things are, but not necessarily the connectivity. It can do it, but in most cases, I find we just work in parallel worlds, particularly when we start installing LED lighting and building management systems. But I can obviously take that offline if Bill wants to cover that. But I do get around and I talk with a lot of people, and my views are quite balanced. I'm always searching for a better way and always open to be convinced. So the first thing is which version of Visio? There's a couple of different versions, and the Office 365 version, you can get 2 of them. You can get what's called the standard or the professional. Go for the professional version, which is also known as Plan 2, because that allows you to link Visio to spreadsheets and databases, which then allows you to take advantage of any existing data sets you have to actually underpin some of the diagrams and things you generate, and also allows you a degree of automation. There's more shapes, there's a few other things, but if you're not sure if you have the professional version, look for the Data tab. There's also a feature called Data Graphics, which most people have never heard of, but once you see it, you'll think, I wish I'd known that, but it's been there since Visio 2007. So these are not new features, but they are things that are really important if you want to save yourself doing an extra diagram when actually you can reuse one for many purposes.
Speaking of old versions, Al mentions that back in the 90s, Visio used to have a network discovery utility, and he's curious if there's third-party tools that will help you discover devices by a scan and then get them into Visio.
The answer is yes, there are. There's quite a few third-party tools that actually will create Visio diagrams as a result of the scan. And so Visio originally wasn't owned by Microsoft. It had discovery capabilities. It used to come with all the symbols and shapes for all the manufacturer's equipments. And when Microsoft purchased Visio, what they did is they took out a lot of that functionality because actually it wasn't maintainable as a general purpose drawing tool. And they've progressively hidden a lot of the features because they were a bit too complex to use or explain. I'll show you some of those features that they've hidden that you can unlock and just bring back as part of this. But there are lots of tools. I think Fluke have got them. There's various others where they will do scans of networks and they will produce a Visio diagram to start with. NetBrain is another one. There's all sorts of other tools out there. SolarWinds. There's all sorts of tools which will do scanning. And to myself, I don't see them as a problem or an issue. A scan just gives you a view of data at that time, but only one view, the technical view. It doesn't show you all the things that weren't covered by the scan. It doesn't show you where things are. So it will give you a logical view, but it's a good set of data to start with. And we can always, what most people will not realize is you can also export data from Visio into a spreadsheet. So if you have a diagram, you can also get an inventory of everything that's on the diagram, maybe like a cabinet layout as an example. So let's go through a couple of things. The first thing is realize that while I'm talking about my experiences, it's all hand-grown because there are no Visio training courses. To my knowledge, we're one of the few people that do a course called Visio for IT, where we just focus on the IT use of Visio. There's others that do things on maybe process mapping, but there's very few training courses around because most people pick up enough to keep them going. But there are books. Look in the books. A lot of stuff I will cover will not necessarily be in the books. There's LinkedIn groups. You can get shapes from different places. And I think this session is being recorded, so you can always come back and look at those. And there's also third-party organizations who supply you for a subscription Visio symbols and shapes of IT equipment. Ultima do the NetZoom range. And there's also a forum done by an ex-Visio guy called Chris Roth, called Visio Guy, where you can ask lots of questions purely around Visio. My perspective is Visio is just a tool to help me document things. So to me, it's just one of the ways. I may want to see something in a database or a spreadsheet or a capacity report or a diagram, but actually I want them all to be the same. And so therefore, my focus is a little bit different. This is more documentation-centric rather than Visio-centric. But obviously, it helps to know what you can use Visio to do for you. So the first thing to understand is when you start using Visio, Visio organizes itself with a collection, with sort of hierarchy of symbols, which we know as shapes. We group the shapes into stencils, and then we can group stencils into templates so that when we do drawings, we can have a specific environment for doing that. It's very easy to create all of these yourself, so that rather than keep trying to find things from different places, you can actually create your own shapes. You can just cut an image off a website and use that as a shape. So you don't have to draw something. You can just use a symbol that's already available as a picture. You can create your own stencil sets. So if you're doing desktop support, you can have desktop support type devices. If you're doing networks, you can have network. So you can have symbol sets which are appropriate to the needs, so that then you minimize the amount of work anybody has to do. And then you can organize it all into a template. So as a working environment, you can set page sizes, symbol sets, and everything. So when you open up, it starts off in landscape mode, scaled to do a data center, which is a very large one, or you can set up a template to open up to do a very small one, or to do an office, but you've got all the symbols and shapes that you have. And so the first thing is to start with the terminologies, that all of these are things where if you spend the effort, read the books, look online, it's well worthwhile spending the effort to make your own stencils and shapes that meet whatever your diagram requirements are. Don't be afraid to do it. It's very, very simple. But be aware that what most people do to avoid that is they reuse people's Visio diagrams. Okay? And so a common thing that most people are not aware of, and this is where you start to get Visio diagrams getting bloated, is I'll show you an example here of a couple of diagrams. And what I've got is I've got a big blank diagram here, and you can see from my file size this is 2 megabytes. And if I open this up, you'll see that there's nothing in this diagram. It's got one page and there's nothing on the diagram. And if I go and I open up a small blank diagram, which in this case is just over 100K, there's nothing on this diagram. So why is one 2 megabyte and why is one the other? And the reason is whenever you drag anything onto a Visio page, Visio remembers that and keeps it in what's called a document stencil. So if I go back to the large diagram, look at this one here. If you go to shapes, where you can select different symbol sets which are appropriate to networks and symbols and other things, and people who've used Visio will recognize all of these. But the one right at the bottom, called document stencil, this is the baggage that often you carry around with you every time you drag something on. So here I've got all this stuff to do with workstations and servers and switches and other things which don't appear on the diagram but are actually in the file. So there are tools within Visio where if we go to File and we do Inspect Diagram, they hide it away. There's one called Reduce File Size where it will look for unused symbol sets, but what it's doing is it's checking your document stencil for anything that's gone in there. So if you, as most customers do, you reuse a diagram, which somebody else has done because it saves you trying to find the symbols and just reuse the same things and they all look the same. Actually, things get bigger and bigger because you don't realize. And just to show you what I mean is if we look down at the bottom here, we can see that we've got various types of servers and other things. And I'll open up a stencil because I want to say do a Cisco, or no, say an HP Blade server. Let's do more shapes. Let's open up a stencil. And I'll go here. And here I've got one called Switches Cisco Nexus. So there's a Cisco Nexus switch. And here's a range of Cisco Nexus switches. And I'm going to drag along 7009 and drop it on the page. And then I'm going to delete it. And I'm going to close this down. And therefore I'm not using it. But if I look at my stencil now, you'll now see down at the bottom, it now appears and it will be in this file forever. So a good lesson is don't reuse diagrams because of the convenience. Always start from one that's designed for your purposes, and you'll find that some of your file sizes may actually go down to be 5 or 10% of what they currently are. So simple Visio thing. Some of you may know this already, but the vast majority of people don't. But Visio keeps your baggage, and so always check and always reduce the file sizes. The next thing is, for a lot of people, there's an option here on my toolbar here that when you look, there's data, which is what you get with Visio Professional. And one of the options you have there is to import from external data. I'll show you that in a moment. But there's another option here called Developer. And what developer is standard features that Visio have hidden away in the more recent versions, which allow you to do macros and programming if you really want to get into that. But the key one is they allow you to unlock things where people have stopped you using shapes, or you want to actually change behaviors. This becomes really useful if you get frustrated and you can't understand why something is doing something. To unlock this developer mode, we just go into File, we go into Options, Advanced, and right at the bottom of the Advanced options is one that says Run in Developer Mode. You all have this. It's always in every version you get the Visio. If you tick that, you'll suddenly have a number of things that allow you to lock things and protect things, but also to unlock things where you've reused shapes from other manufacturers or symbol sets, and you're having difficulty thinking, why can't I change the size? Or why can't I do things? And so, just as an example of some of the things that you may find that come in useful, if I create a rectangle like that, and I go to Developer, under Protection, I can stop the height, the width, the rotation, and all sorts of things. I can stop it being edited. So if you have documentation you want to give to users or customers, and you don't want them to alter it, you can always set a lot of these protections, and they would never know how to undo it because this feature is hidden away to basically take off some of those protection features. There's also many other things in here that we have. I'll cover a couple of them as we go along. But if anybody has any questions, please indicate them or come back. And Alan, if you can check on the chat line.
Yep. Vendors beware now that I know how to change that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did have a question a while back from Alan Miller. Just curious about the Snmp integration.
Yep.
Probably related to the scanning.
There isn't any. That was all taken out. But the thing is, if you have an Snmp tool, I used to develop Snmp management systems when I was a network troubleshooter. You can use that data to actually help you build information, because an output from an Snmp discovery tool or an SP management system effectively can be a CSV or spreadsheet type file. Okay, so let's take you into a couple of other little things, and what we'll do is I'll take out of that and I'll just show you a number of techniques. And so probably if I just close this down, let's close down Visio and just go in here. Let's just show you just a couple of simple things that we can do. And what I'll do is I'll just do a LAN diagram. Okay. Okay, so here's a diagram that people might do of a network of some form. And what we'll do is we'll use symbols, and we'll use links between things. And one of the features that Visio has is that you can, rather than have to type everything, because a lot of people would say drag across a switch and they would double click on it to give it a name and call it switch 6, and then they'd want to put the IP address underneath, and you can't actually put an IP address on that. What you'd have to do is create some text, create a text box and put like that. So one of the rules of Visio is you can have one piece of text for a box, but you'll notice that some of these actually have two pieces of text, and I didn't do it that way. And so one of the things that Visio has is the ability to actually have multiple sets of text and color, all as part of sort of standard Visio Professional. And what you would normally then have to do is I'd have to group these and set them as a group to drag them around and do things. Okay, so they would move together.
You've been spying on me.
Yeah, but that's because people don't do it the same way. Let's give an example of, I'll show you what I'm going to do. So here, for instance, here's a network diagram, which looks very similar. I've got symbols and I've got links. The difference now is I've used one of Visio's features where you can embed data into the shapes. And so if I click on this and I do a right click on that switch, the option here for data is I can embed data from a shape which looks, guess what, just like a spreadsheet. And I've got data there. And the great thing about Visio is all of this can be filled in from a spreadsheet, so that I don't need to have separate data sets. My Visio diagram can have the embedded knowledge. But the clever thing that Visio does is you can bring this out and show it in whatever form you want. And not just for devices. So what I have for this switch is one thing, but I can also do it for links. So what card does that go to on what device? What's the port name? And the feature that brings this all out is a feature called data graphics, which Visio introduced in Visio 2007. And what data graphics allows you to do is, rather than having to actually type a lot of this information to see, what we can do is we can just bring that all on in one go and just say, well, just show me consistently for every device what its IP address and what its status is without any typing. Or maybe I want to do it in a slightly different format. So I want to have the IP address underneath and the model number and things. So actually, it's a way of getting consistency. So if I've got, as with New York City, I've got 2,000 diagrams to do. Do you think I want to type every IP address? No, I want to take what they get from their monitoring tools and use that to underpin my diagrams. But I want to use that in my rack layouts. So if I have a rack diagram or cabinet layout, maybe I want to do the same thing. So here's information in there. Maybe just bring out the same thing. This is a standard Visio feature, been available for 12 years now.
Where did you get this data from to begin with?
You get it from a spreadsheet or a monitoring system. And so let me show you. Let me show you how to do this. And there's many different ways you can use this data graphics feature. But the great thing here is what it means is one diagram can serve multiple views. You may do a diagram to show a certain amount of information. And I've got an example here of a floor plan of a small data center where I can do one view where I can show by color the types of the cabinets, but also I've put in what the cabinet names are and also the text for the type of cabinet. So the color coding and everything all matches. But I may want to show a different way, which is I want to see how much power is going into each cabinet, what's the circuit breaker feed, and how close are we to this? Just like you would have on a wide area link, what's the maximum amount of bandwidth and how close are we to it? Visio is a great way for showing capacity and to show people where you're getting close to limits. Or I may want another way, just to show me how much space is used, which ones have got the most space. I'm not doing anything other than using standard Visio functionality to do this. The way I do this is I embed data into the shapes. And what you can see against this rack, I've got a set of information, which building is it in, location, what's the cabinet name, how much space, how much power, and all sorts of other things, all the sorts of things that you might keep about a rack. Who's the owner of the rack? What's the key number? When was the cabinet last checked? Why not actually show on this diagram which cabinets haven't been audited for the last 6 months? So I can see which ones are different to the others. I can see differences in status. So this Visio data graphics feature goes very much hand in hand with getting data into shapes. So let me show you how to do that. It's very easy, to me anyway. But what you'll find is it's not that difficult. So what we'll do is we'll just start with, I'll close this one down. We'll start with the Visio diagram, which has got nothing on it. And I'll take you through the process.
And I'm going to throw a question at you that you can answer later. Al is asking if WMI can be used for the device discovery to get it into Visio.
Yes, in terms of it provides a set of data, but then we have to link the data to the shapes. Okay, and the reason I say that is WMI will give you lots of information about lots of different types of devices, but you may use different symbols for switches and routers and PCs and laptops and others. So actually, and this is one of the lessons that I learned, was it's a great feature, but there is a limit to the automation. And so I'll show you that. So here I have a blank diagram, and I have, let's take a server here, and I'll drop a server onto there, and there's a server. And typically what we do is we double click on the server and we'll change the name, we'll call it server 1. Okay, and if we wanted any more information, we would embed data. If I do a right click on here and look at data, we can see that there is no data on this server. There's nothing in there. To try and enter it manually is very painful, but I'll show you quick, simple ways and quick ways. So if I want to link data to this, the best thing is to start with existing information already. And the way we do that is we go to the data tab at the top. We have a couple of options, and where you see this external data here, there's a couple of options. I'll go for the custom import, as it's sort of the slow controlled way. So I go custom import, and it says, what data would you like to link to? Excel, Access, SQL. So effectively, anything that you can get into a CSV or Excel type form is useful, but you can link to databases and run queries and other things as well. It depends on, but I'm just doing it simple, what you can do yourself. If we do next, it will then prompt you which Excel spreadsheet do you want. And I'm just going to browse to a spreadsheet. Let's go to Visio Utilities. Here I have an inventory of equipment, and do a next. The next thing it says is, in every spreadsheet, you could have multiple tabs. You might have one for switches, one for routers and servers. Which one do you want? And in this case, there's just one tab. We have all the equipment inventory. And do next. And then it gives you the ability to filter things out, because this could be a spreadsheet of the whole of the US Army, but we only want to do Andrews Air Force Base. So actually, I don't want to bring in 2 million devices. I only want to bring in maybe 300 or something. So you have the ability to, first of all, filter out data. So it shows you the columns and what's in the data. So we can see the names of the servers and that. Because if we had passwords and things there, we might not want to actually bring in the passwords into the diagram. Or we might not want to bring in the IP addresses. So you can filter out some of the data in terms of the columns. And then on the rows, likewise, you can filter out data on the rows. So we want to do a network diagram, so we don't want anything that's not a network device, as an example. But I'll leave those as they are, so just bring in them all. Do a next. And then the last thing it will do is it will give us an option to then say, give me something that uniquely identifies things so I can refresh my diagram if there's any changes, any of the data. So if my discovery picks up a new IP address or picks up a change in any of the parameters, or we add extra columns into the spreadsheet, how would I know which shape links to which ones? Give me a reference, and we're just going to use the name of the device in this case. It could be a database reference, it could be anything. And then finish. And what that does is that exposes that spreadsheet here in the diagram, so that then you can see it. And effectively, it takes a local copy of the spreadsheet into the diagram, so that then you have it, and it's then not joined to the spreadsheet anymore, which is how we can reuse this data, do various things with it, and then refresh it when convenient, when we're back on the network or back in the office. And to link the two together, all I do is I do a left click and I drag across to that server, and I drop that on top, and you see the little blue box there, and that has now linked all the data in that shape. If I show the shape data there, you can now see the server's now got its name, type, manufacturer, and everything's all embedded for you. And if I wanted to show the other servers, I could drag them across, just drag across a couple of others, and then I can just drag each one of those. And so I've got the servers. And so that's the first thing, which is to link data to shapes. The same will also apply to connectors as well. So I could drag across a connector, and I can now link to a second spreadsheet where I may have additional data. An Excel workbook, do next. Choose one. I've got here one called Connections Spreadsheet, do next. I'll just do finish because I've got it already set up. In here I've got all the ports on a switch and which ports they link to on various servers and things, and what the port names and VLANs are. And so I can do exactly the same thing there. I can drag across this and drop it on top of that, and that now has all of the embedded information. And if I now looked at that, that connector has all of that. I haven't had to type anything. I've embedded the knowledge from those spreadsheets. So you now see why, when I started, good data gives you good diagrams.
So let me catch up to where you're at real quick. So
yeah.
I think a lot of the folks in the group, I recognize about half of them who are attending right now, they're running IT firms, they're outsourced IT MSPs.
Yeah.
So they're going to have 10 to 100 clients, each with their own network infrastructure.
Yep.
They're going to probably export some data like you have into spreadsheets from Automate or Autotask or tools like that.
Yep.
They're still going to have to build their Visio diagram, but once they link them, they can keep updating that same spreadsheet, correct?
Yep. You can keep updating the spreadsheet on a per customer basis, and you could do a network diagram using this. You could do a floor plan that shows where things are. You could have multiple offices and drill into each office to see what equipment's in there. Lots of different ways of doing it. Whatever's useful or important, but these are physical diagrams really. sort of networks and things, but there's also many others, applications and services, websites, and other things.
So on a spreadsheet update, how would
Yep.
you notice new equipment you haven't mapped yet?
That's the problem, because what you saw there was, out of that spreadsheet, what I did was, if I bring up that external data window, and I go back, and you see there's multiple tabs now. It hasn't linked the switches or the routers because I manually filtered things. Okay, I manually joined things together or linked them. If you take things out of the spreadsheet, it doesn't take it out of the diagram. If you take things out of the diagram, it doesn't take it out of the spreadsheet. If we add new connections, it doesn't add connections between things. You have to manually link things together. And so the level of automation you get is to save yourself a lot of effort and time, and any changes are reflected through of the existing environment. But you must bear in mind, a diagram is a filtered view. If I had a list of all my customers and all the equipment that we're actually managing and all the buildings and the towns that they're in, I will filter out by customer and do one customer's diagram. Maybe there's different offices and what's in them and the printers they've got, PCs and things. But actually, I'm not going to do all the other ones. I would manually filter out others. So the level of automation is the transfer of data into the diagram and the refreshing of it. If you want to actually fully automate the process, where the diagrams are drawn for you and updated with any changes in data, like we've added new devices, we've taken some out, that's where you have to go to commercial software, which is what our main business is. Because with New York City, if we've got 2,000 locations, I'm not going to know what's happening in all of those. I just want the diagrams to be updated. So as long as people say we've added in a new wireless access point, we've taken out 5 servers, take them out of the diagrams or add them in or connect them up. So I'm not here really to talk about our commercial software. I'll show you at the end in a few minutes what the difference is. But Visio as standard is about speedily creating and updating diagrams, but you still have to manually check and filter and do things.
Right. So this is bringing in real detailed data into the diagrams we are already making anyways.
Yes.
One great question I see then is, okay, so obviously if links change, whatever else, we still have to fix the spreadsheet for the data.
Yeah.
Let's say an IP range changes on a local area network. Will that update automatically next time you connect to the spreadsheet?
Yes, because if you've changed it in your spreadsheet, it will then update all of the things that are connected in the spreadsheet to this. So if devices have changed their IP addresses, then all the IP addresses will change.
So as long as you have access to the spreadsheet, say you're on your network, you click the refresh all button or you open Visio and it will pull that new data down.
Exactly, yeah. And the next thing is to think, we've got the data embedded in there, but I want to actually now see it. And this is where, if I look at this device, we have this data. How do we add that data graphics? Well, it's very simple. And this is really where you get the functionality that then starts to then say, well, actually, this is worth doing because I've got 3 or 4 different views of the same device. Why not use one set of data for all the different diagrams? So if you want to add a data graphic, we go to Advanced Data Graphics, or it might just be called Data Graphics. It's an older version. And I'll do a new one just to show you, because you have multiple sets of graphics. So let's do a new data graphic. And it goes to a little dialog that says, what do you want to show? Well, let's do a new item. So let's take a bit of data and let's take the name of the device. How do we want to display this? As text, as data bars, as icon sets, and just so you know, so data bars would be things like this, speedos, really for capacity and things. You may want to show icon sets. So these are red, amber, green type indicators. This has got this has got that. Or you might want to do by color. And so this will then show you that, these are production, these are test, these are under support, these are under warranty, whatever. But if we just go to text, there's many options of text, and I'm just going to use one called heading 3, which is centered text. So let's put text. Let's not have any fill, and let's put the name of the device in the center and above the shape itself. So for these shapes, if I do an OK, and do an OK, apply this, there's server A, and if I now take all of these others, I can apply the same data graphic, the one I've just done, which is highlighted here, and apply that to all of them. You can see we've got server A, B, and C. And if there was some other text there, you can always just hide that and say, let's just edit this and hide any previous shape text there. And that's how easy it is to get consistency. If I want to add more data, you just go and edit this, do a right click, edit. Let's add another item. Let's take the IP address. Let's put this as text. Do the same process, heading 3, not filled. Don't use the default position, put it in the center. Let's put it underneath the shape. Do an OK, do an OK. How much typing did I do? How many mistakes did I make cutting and pasting? And so all I need to start with is a spreadsheet, and people have lots of them, and I can use this to underpin diagrams. Now, obviously, I could start with a database, which would be a bit better. There'd be an audit trail on a database. There'd be the ability to filter things out from the database without having to manually filter things. But it doesn't really matter. It's just data. And so to show you different ways you can use that data graphics feature, because you can put them on the left and the right, you can stack them, you can do all sorts. I'll just bring up the thing I had previously.
And 5-minute warning for you, Dave.
Yeah, so we'll just be going in a moment. So let's just do, so.
We want all 5 minutes.
Yep, okay. So I showed you the rack layout and the diagram. Other ways, you might want to overlay things on background. So this is a view of where things are, floor boxes, PCs, wireless access points. But of course, what we're doing is we're embed data, and we're bringing some of that data out. I don't need all of it. I just need to know things that will help with support or to do things. Color coding is really useful for people where you want to show risks. So this is an Itil type diagram where what we're showing is physical servers at the bottom, virtual systems that run on them, and in this case, databases and applications. So I'm going to color code and show everything that's out of support or going out of support from a manufacturer that's end of life in red, amber, green, or maybe from a DR perspective with icons.
There are actually conditional statements in there that says, you know, if data is so far away, change the color.
Yeah, and to then show you what that is, all we're doing is the data graphic, which is coming for those that we're showing with all of these, is you'll see all these icon sets and show what we're going to say recovery planning status. This is the one. Edit this, show the recovery planning status as an icon set, and show it as green if we have a tested plan, show it as amber if it's plan only, 3 if it's plan in preparation. So you can put your own conditions, and effectively you create your own dashboards to explain to customers why you need to get rid of Windows 7 or Windows XP, and what your vulnerabilities are, and what is really something you need to do. But visuals do help communicate risks a lot better than just lists. And that's why we use red, amber, green as colors.
Okay, Al has a tough question that I might even try if you, depending on what you have. Can you envision ways from the auto task RMM and PSA to get data in a place we can access it from Visio?
The answer to that is I don't know. If you can produce a CSV output, yes. Now you can bring in AutoCAD type files with their layers as backgrounds into Visio, and all the layers are preserved. So we often do this with data center floor plans where people give us something that's already there, but the embedded data structures don't work very well because we have to match them up. Visio is much more flexible and easier to work with.
Yeah, and Al, from my 2 cents, kind of what Dave said, which is I can't see us accessing that data live because it's all hosted.
Yes, and so that's why Visio takes it effectively as an offline copy.
But if we can do a data dump once a week, once a month, however often you need it, and then have it access those, I could see that.
Yep. Yeah, and a lot of people say if the data is not up to date, it's not accurate. But wait a minute, we're all running with spreadsheets that are not automatic. We're all planning things for the future of things that don't yet exist. You can't automate the future. So if you're going to try and have planning documents that also can be used for operational support, it's not necessary to have everything up to date, as long as people understand that actually this rack is full if you actually look at it in a rack diagram from a planning perspective. But if you went and physically looked at the rack, there's nothing in it, because actually there's overlapping projects. So a lot of people think we have to have things up to date and accurate, but the real world is actually we're managing change, and change is about managing things where we're managing future states. We're allocating ports on switches. we're actually replacing old devices. We want to know what the resilience of a path is, but it may be in cold standby. So a lot of people say, why doesn't our software, our own software, why don't we automatically discover things? And we don't need to. So there's lots of tools that do that, and a lot of them are free. The biggest problem is bringing them all together of what we think we've got, what we used to have, but also what we've planned to do, so that we can migrate a data center, or we can transition on board a customer's environment where he's giving us odd bits of information and we're getting confused, and so is he. That's why we're doing documentation and supplying the standard things. I'll just finish off because I know we're just limited as to what is the difference with full automation. And really the difference is it's that filtering and that updating. And so this is our own software just to show the difference. And what we do is we try and break it down where we break a database of components. And so here I have a rack with a cabinet with equipment, and there's a layout of the rack so you can see where we have space and where all the devices are. If you want that produced as a diagram, we just click on diagram and we effectively filter from the database, match up to a Visio stencil that you see here. So what Visio shapes do you want to use when you do this? And you just press draw. So for a lot of people, the normal point at which we get involved is, how long does it take to draw a cabinet layout? And they said, well, 2 to 5 hours. And we said, well, you can take that down to about 10 seconds. So if you're going to do 100 racks, do you want to take 15, 20 days? Or do you want to take 10 minutes? And so that's how automation does work. But the difference here is this draws whatever the rack is at that time. So actually, you're not having to refresh things. There are refresh type things, but we're embedding the data. We're using templates. We're using symbol sets and things which you manage yourself, so you keep the file sizes down. But that's where you automate things a lot more than what you can just do with Visio. But all we're doing is the database is doing that. Yep.
So Dave, how could we get a hold of you if we have more questions, either in the automation side or the Visio side?
Yeah. So I'll finish off very quickly then. So first thing is, always think about how you organize your diagrams, what you see, but how you embed data so that you don't have to put everything on the diagram. And that's where embedded data comes in. Link Visio to data sources is a good idea. One diagram can serve multiple views without people having to redraw things. And I've shown you that data graphics feature there that you've seen. It really makes a huge difference to a lot of people. And a lot of customers and managers like it because it gives visual changes to things. But there are limitations. It's very good for quick diagrams, but everything you have to do in filtering and selection is manual. So don't expect it to change the whole world, but at least it will save a lot of time. But if you're going to go to bigger ones, then look beyond them, and then that's where you start going into our tool sets. Then there's other ones as well that have some form of database linked to a graphical output. We just have to use Visio. But this is what the difference is. How long do you think it's going to take to draw 6,000 rack diagrams, which is what my current project is? And the answer is man years, probably about 15 man years, or in our terms, probably about 2 days. And so there are ways to sort of organize it, but we can't do it without good data. So always, in most cases, get good data and you'll get good diagrams. Just go and have a look. Go and look at things. Now, if you want to know a little bit more about this, there's lots of stuff on our website. There's our free Visio utilities. There's obviously Microsoft have been adding more stuff on there, but it's still very basic for beginners. There's not a lot of advanced stuff. For ourselves, our software company, AssetGen, we have our commercial software called AssetGen, but our Visio utilities are great for people doing networks and various other things. And there's videos of each one. It's all free. Just contact us and we'll send you the link to download them and keep you updated with them.
And Dave, did I hear you do not use Facebook much?
We haven't really used Facebook a lot because the types of organizations we're dealing with, normally medium to large organizations, they've tended to often rely on things like LinkedIn. So we get a lot of leads coming through LinkedIn and webinars and other things. Okay. But more recently, what we're finding is a lot of IT people are very conscious of revealing who they really are. So they're actually going to Facebook and actually doing things on a personal basis outside of their business. And we never knew about the IT Documentation Users Group, but actually anything we can do to help you guys with what we learn is good, because the more people that understand, the easier life is for everyone.
Absolutely. appreciate your presentation very much, Dave. I learned a lot. I feel like we could probably use another 8-10 hours just in the basics.
If anybody is interested, and I'll post it on the documentation users group.
Perfect.
It's a bit of a long way to go, but in Las Vegas at the end of September, I'm doing a 3-hour workshop. I think it costs $100 about Visio automation techniques, and we've got an exhibition stand where we're talking with people who are designing networks and all sorts of other things. But if anybody's around, then obviously come in. But please look at our Visio utilities, because for a lot of people, I develop them really for myself, but they're really useful if you're doing any form of networks or other things.
So from the chat windows, we do have lots of positive feedback and thanks. Well received. These guys were much more engaged in past ones, so I can tell they're excited. Thank you all for attending. I'm going to share my brief second. I hope you can all give feedback about this presentation. You can either send me a message, send Dave a message, post it at ITDUG if you don't mind it being public. Especially if it's respectful, even if it's for improvement, we want to get this content better for you guys. Our next webinar, I just got scheduled about an hour and a half ago. It's going to be Chris Schaller of Christo IT. He's been in business for about 20 years at MSP. He's also the creator of Inlier. Some of you have maybe have heard that. I think it might be a bit ConnectWise focused. But we're talking from the side of his MSP, talking about death by 1,000 cuts, what you're really losing when you don't do real-time data collection, such as time entries and documentation. And guys, this is about documentation, right? So stay tuned for updates the next week or so on ITDUG for that. Other resources to get a hold of us, that's the ITDUG link. If you're not a member, feel free to join. We just ask you answer the question, why do you want to join? That helps us keep the spammers out. There are processes and documentation links as well as this video available on eurekaprocess.com. However, I will also send you a direct email with this recording when it's ready, probably by tomorrow. And feel free to contact me. If we can't get Dave's contact info for some reason, I'll definitely pass on the message to him if you need him.
Also, I'm obviously in the Facebook group and things as well. Get in contact with us. But if there's anything I can do for yourself, Alan, or others to pass across some experience or knowledge, just please ask, because I believe actually this sort of experience should be shared. I don't really like traveling to the US, even though I'm paid to do it and I make money, when actually you guys should be doing it instead.
That sounds great, Dave. Thank you all so much for attending and participating. See you guys soon.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Alan. Thanks for the opportunity.